what we're going to explore in the rest of this morning's session is what's present when it's not working. Okay, so now forget the what's missing part. We'll get to that in a minute. And let me tell you why this is actually very important. And it has to do with something that I didn't know, and I turned out to be what I thought I knew was totally wrong, and it changed the way that I worked with clients. If you want to get a PhD in counseling psych, you got to do original research. So I got a great idea. At that time, my wife and I were running a lot of couple groups where we were doing like 12 to 15 hours of training in group settings for usually 6 to 8 couples at a time. A couple could be a married couple, it could be a parent-child, it could be 2 business partners, it could be brothers. It didn't matter as long as it was 2 people in an ongoing relationship, and they were going to come and try to learn some skills that would make their relationship healthier. And typically we would charge $200 to $300 for the 12 sessions, which was still at that time relatively reasonable. So we, in order to do my research, I put an ad in the paper and said, you can have this class free if you'll participate in my research study. Okay, so now what I was trying to figure out was, could I predict in advance, by just knowing a little bit about the people that were coming into the class, who would learn the most and who would leave actually integrating into their behavior the skills that we were trying to teach them? So you got the simple premise. Now, I thought there were a few things that would determine who learned the most. I thought that if they had a pretty good level of relationship satisfaction going in, there might not be defensiveness, and therefore they'd be open to learning. So I gave them an assessment on relationship satisfaction. Then I felt if they had higher self-esteem, if they felt better about themselves, and there's a whole lot of stuff on learning and self-esteem, and that people with really low self-esteem are so focused on what's wrong with everything that they have a hard time letting new information in. So I thought higher levels of self-esteem could predict who would be better learners. And then I thought there's a concept called conceptual complexity, which is really how many different ways can you think about something. And in order to understand somebody's point of view that's different than yours, it's helpful to have a higher level of conceptual complexity. In other words, you're willing to think about things in more than one way. So I thought a measure of that might be useful. And then I thought I should look at their present relationship communication patterns. The way I did that is I gave them a problem checklist. They both filled it out individually. Then they compared the two. They had to find one that they agreed was a problem in their relationship. And then they both had to agree that they'd be willing to try to talk with each other about this problem for 3 to 5 minutes while I tape recorded them. All right. That's going to give me their present relationship communication patterns. So I designed with a guy, John Gottman, who was a professor at Illinois at the time. He then went to Stanford. And I designed an interaction analysis coding system where I'm looking for all of the negative and positive things they're doing in their relationship communication. So I take a 5-minute conversation they're having with each other, put it on a transcript, and then I go back and I code the whole thing. Now, I should have had a $50,000 grant at least to do this research because the number of hours this took was awesome. Because I'm going to have to give them that same test at the end to see if any of their communication patterns had changed. Are you all still kind of with me? All right. So I get the whole thing done, and there were people who made dramatic changes. And there were people who made almost no changes. And everything that I thought that could predict that was absolutely wrong. All right? It had nothing to do with relationship satisfaction coming in. It had nothing to do with self-esteem coming in. It seemed to have nothing to do with conceptual complexity coming in. And it didn't even have to do with the present status of their relationship communication factors. And thank goodness I had taken down some demographic data on each person coming in. This was things like level of education, how long they'd been in this relationship, if it was a partnership of marriage, did they have children, and if so, how many, and so forth. And you know what the 2 best predictors were of who would learn the most and get the most out of it? This is what blew my mind. How many years you were in the partnership and how many children you had. People that had been in the partnership the longest, who had the greatest number of kids, learned the most in the course. It was almost like they were in this so deep that they just figured they would take anything that could be helpful. And they were committed to each other. You know, and they would make it. You know who was the absolute worst? This one surprised me too, but now I understand it. People who were engaged to be married, but the wedding hadn't happened yet. And it's almost like, you know, they come in and they're really terrified to try anything new because, you know, the wedding invitations have gone out and everybody's counting on this now. And what if we find out, if we talk about anything too difficult, that this isn't going to work, then we're in deep trouble. You know, so they seem to be the worst at picking up anything that would be useful. So that's kind of a vote against premarital interventions. Actually, ministers often require, clergy require that now, but I think it'd be wiser to say that if I married you, you have to agree to come back 6 months into your marriage, and then we'll do the skills training. Because by then they'll start to figure out, oh, occasionally this doesn't work the way I thought it would, right? So what do we got to do different? Now, that's still not the most amazing thing that came out of this. I thought that the way you help people create better relationships, and it's what we're doing here, is you teach them new skills. You teach them how to do some stuff that either they forgot or they didn't know how to do, and therefore you add to their repertoire, and then you know, you teach them healthy processes, and then maybe if they start to use those, the relationship gets better. Now, I still do believe that that has an impact, but you know what? The couples who improved their relationships most dramatically were not the couples who were making a lot of changes and doing new skills. You know what they were doing? Oh, let's go back to this. They were the couples who stopped doing the negative stuff as much. They didn't even learn any new skills. They just became more aware of how destructive some of the things were that they were doing, and they chose to do those less. And that changed the relationship. Now, what if you're a counselor working with couples? Well, that gives you a new way of approaching it, doesn't it? See, I don't have to give you anything new. I just have to help you become aware of what you're doing that's destructive. And that's why that what's present, what's missing thing is such a powerful model, because when they complete the list for you of what's present, they're going to be describing all the stuff that they're doing that ain't working, right? And if I can make them be aware of it, then sometimes they'll catch themselves just before they do it and either choose to do nothing, which is better than doing the negative thing, or maybe choose to do something more positive. So what we found out was, if you really want to help people whose relationships are in trouble and you want to help them fast, and the reason you got to help them fast is this. There's a whole lot of people who go to counseling or therapy and you get one session. That's all you get. And then they make a decision that, oh, yeah, they're not going to be back. Unless you got to do something in that first session that makes them see that change is possible and makes them feel like there's possibility here. And if they don't experience that in their first session, they're not coming back, right? They're not stupid, right? So how do you do that? Well, then this research would suggest the fastest way to do that is help them become aware of the negative stuff they're doing and ask them to do it less. Give them some simple ways to do it less. Like, well, when the other person says something that really frustrates and upsets you, I want you to just walk away. Because that's not the way they used to do it. So all I'm doing is what? I'm giving them a strategy to stop the escalation. Right? Very simple one. That's just an example. So we're trying to interrupt what we're going to be calling here the roadblocks and barriers. So let's go to your handout. Yours is gold, and I want to go to the back side of your first sheet, because we're going to describe now a bunch of behaviors that are very common in human relationship. I know that all of you know how to do all of them because you saw the big people do them when you were a little person. But let's look on the back side, and we're going to talk about, if you do these roadblocks and barriers a lot, what's going to happen in the relationships that you use these in. And I just made a list of 10 things. You could add, more. First of all, it's going to block open and honest communication and sharing. So when you do these things, people get defensive, and when people get defensive, they're not open and honest. It thwarts the other person's problem solving. So this, unfortunately, can go either direction. It either creates dependency or it creates rebellion or resistance. 3, it increases emotional distance and defensiveness. It prevents cooperative, collaborative effort. It diminishes the other person's self-esteem. It triggers resistance and resentment. It can lead to feelings of dependency, defeat, and inadequacy. It curtails open and honest disclosure of feelings and wants. It increases conflicts, communication breakdowns, and misunderstandings. It leads to unhealthy relationship processes and may permanently damage the relationship. Now, I do invite you to put this to the test. So I know you all know how to do all of these, so it would just be pretty easy for you to make a list of 3 or 4 that you were going to go home tonight and do on somebody. To lead into this, let me just say that over the years, I have come to believe that healthy relationship has some qualities that can be described in simple words that actually have pretty deep meanings, but respect, equality, and mutuality. Healthy relationship has that. These roadblocks do not have that. These roadblocks make you one up on the other person. You know, so it's not an equal relationship. These roadblocks make you try, they're attempts to control the other person rather than connect with the other person. They're an attempt to have power over somebody rather than power with them. They're attempts to change the other person rather than change yourself. And so they have a lot of negative side effects when they're used in relationship. We call them high-risk behaviors because they're high risk of damaging the relationship, making the other person defensive.